Oishvav. So the Rebbe learns now a lesson from this Rashi, from this Medrash, not the Rashi, from the Medrash, how important it is, the idea of study, of the nishma, of the learning, for all mitzvahs. Of course, here we're talking about the mitzvah of Shoftim v'Shoitrim, but this is a central mitzvah. In every mitzvah, we sort of have the learning part, which tells us what we need to do. But this Medrash tells us that the learning part is not only as an introduction, as a means by the way, so you know what to do, but that there is value independently just by the learning, the shoftim, that's the main part also, because to really fulfill what the Eibishter wants is not just to do, but you be fully engaged, that also the nishma, the understanding, is part of it. Vav. Der inyan hanal benegeit to mishpat. The above idea, as we talk with regards to judgment, to the law, seinen an inyan kloli fun kol ubechol ha'torah mitzvos. That's a general theme of all and in all and in all of Torah mitzvahs. Is faran me'inyonei b'derkiyum for yeder mitzvah. Something similar idea is by the fulfillment of every mitzvah. Aidei kol echad v'achas, by each one and one. Man or woman has to learn something. We have this idea as it is by mishpat in the observance of Torah mitzvahs for each individual. Vabir. And what's the explanation? Der chiluk zwischen shoftim und shofterim, the difference between judges and police enforcers, is bedoimet zum chiluk zwischen nasu und nishma. That is similar to the difference between when the Yidden said, we will do, and then we will listen. Shoftim, the judges, is in yonim, what they do is nishma, their verstand, the understanding, the logic, fun of und machen Herren Torah mitzvahs, and that they make Torah mitzvahs to be heard, transmit, that people know, they teach what they learned. Und shoitrim, so that's the intellect, that's the nishma. Shoitrim tun oiv dem nase. Shoitrim, they accomplish the doing, the asiya bepoil, that the action, you should actually do it. Koyelel oich maise meloshin kifiyah, to include not just doing, but to force to do. Because the word ma'asim, it's also asiya, means to force, to do, and to enforce the rules. Bedugmas hashoitrim, similar to the police who are the nase, that they enforce the rule. Was bechlolus is does der inyan from Kabbalah, so generally that's the idea of accepting the yoke. Ken men meinen, so one might think that the main thing is the doing. As nishma is nit kin tachlis for sich allein. That to listen, to understand, to learn, that's not something that is of value and goal on its own. It's only sort of something of a preparation of the mitzvah, an introduction, so that you know how to do the mitzvah. You have to learn. Which leads to the doing of mitzvahs. Hotman gave them the hero from the Medrash now. So now we have the lesson from the above Medrash. As the Eibishter haste that Hashem commands as Zayin Nishma, that you need Nishma Shoftim al Sanavedel Atzma, the listening, the learning, the judges as a independent service, not just to lead to Nase, but Nishma by itself, the learning, the Shoftim by itself. Das ist auch einer von the Biurim in them. This is also one of the explanation. Was der Seder is Nase v'nishma. The order is to do and then to listen. Nase koidem l'nishma. So, which means that it's not learning so that you know what to do. You do, and then you have to learn addition. Then you have to nishma. Das ist nicht nur zu lieben Nase. It's not just nishma so that you know what to do. As the Nuah von Kabbalah's oil soll sein bitokva ubishleimusa, so that your accepting the yoke should be fully, and you don't want it to be involved on an araimishum without mixing in from time im sichle mitzad nishma, that a reasonable intellectual reason because of nishma. Nor das is euch zu lieben nishma. It has the reason why Nasa comes before Nishma, also for the purpose of Nishma. It's not only for the purpose of Nasa. So if the Nishma comes before, then the Nasa won't be done purely for the Kabbalah soil. That's the reason why we want first Nasa and then Nishma, but actually want first Nasa and then Nishma for the purpose of Nishma. When der Nishma kommt for Nasa, when the listening comes before Nasa, can sein, then it might be as the nishma is blois achona v'achshore to Nasa. Then the listening and the learning is just a means of preparation, getting ready for Nasa, so you know what to do. Limud mevul de maisa. That's learning to bring to maisa. But if there is already Nasa and then nishma, that means it's for the sake of learning. Pshas ober the nishma kumt noch Nasa. When nishma comes after Nasa, no, then was the asiyah of Gitong about after the asiyah has already been accomplished. His movement is understood as the nishma is nitzalibunas. Then it's understood. You're not listening and learning so that you know what to do. You've already done it. But it's a service. It's complete. It's a goal by itself. Just as by Yidden, the Shoftim, as the Medrash says, that the Rebbe brought down, that it's Titan Lecho, the Iker of Torah Shabbat. Why Taka do we need to have this learning on its own? Well, the Shleimus HaChavivus Ba'atayim de Lamaila. When is the complete dearness and the delight of above? It's not when you just do, when you're also involved with the Nishma. When by Yidden exists the understanding, the grasp in matters of Torah mitzvahs. Hashem wants a dwelling place in the lower world. Dwelling place means he wants to live in there so that the lower realms should appreciate Hashem. They need to understand as alle tachtoinim zol werden adira, that all the lower ones should become a dwelling place, v'keli zu getlichkeit, and a vessel for godliness. Shaz by Eden tutzich oiv blois den nasa. When by Eden there's only the doing, asiya kabbalah seil, is afal pi as in them direkt sich oiz ein bittel zum rotzen elias. So although in that is expressed his self-negation to the will of the above, he expresses, you see, he does what Hashem wants. He subjugates himself. Is das aber nicht an inyan, but then it's not a matter was dringt durch sein Metzies b'chol proteo, that penetrates and goes through his being in all of his details. He does it because from the outside he does it. But your mind and your intellect don't recognize it, not dwelling place. You do it because you're doing the Ratzah Kabbalah soil, but your koiches pnimim haven't become engaged in that dwelling place for Hashem. Kedei soll sich durchführen der Kavone von Dire betachtoinim, in order for it to be accomplished, the intent of the dwelling place below, is nicht genug, was a Yid sich mevatel zum Ratzon Elyon. It isn't sufficient the fact that a Yid subjugates himself to the wishes of the Supreme. Nor kulei b'chol protov, but the person entirely and all of his detail Muzun verna keli, they must become a vessel, a dira to kedusha, to holiness. Was dos is dafke. When can you become a vessel? When it is oich do koichos hapnimim nishma. When there also exists the inner powers to listen, havona vasoga, to understand and to grasp. So the idea is to also independently, the idea of learning, because the learning, not only to learn to know what to do. That's why when the Nasa comes before the Mishnah, Nishma, it's not only that the Nasa is on the right way, that you're doing it without getting involved in intellectually, but then since you have already done it, the Nishma is for the purpose of just learning it. And what's the goal of that? So that the Dira should penetrate, that also your mind should become a dwelling place for the Eberster, not just your doing. So that your Nishma, understanding and grasping your inner koiches, should become a dwelling place for Hashem. This is the general difference, the advantage of Torah even without mitzvahs. And then we have, within mitzvahs itself, the Rebbe is going to explain two levels. There is the level of just the command. All mitzvahs are commandments across the board. That's the nasa part. Then every mitzvah has its particular kapona. That's the nishma part within the mitzvah. Zayin. Just as there is an advantage in learning and understanding Torah Nishma, legabe kiyuma mitzvahs, measuring it relative to observance of the mitzvahs. Similar, we have these two aspects within the mitzvah, observance of the mitzvah itself. As it's known, it's known that in the mitzvahs there are two types, two categories of kavanah. To do it because it's Hashem's mitzvah, that's an equal to all mitzvahs, and specifically the intent of that mitzvah. Aleph, you have the kavanah klolis, you have the general intention, which is equal to all mitzvahs. That is the first part of the bracha. When you make on a mitzvah, is chelik the nusach habracha hashava b'chol mitzvahs. That's the part of the language of the bracha, which by all mitzvahs is the same. You make the bracha, asher kirishonu b'mitzvahs v'tzivonu. He sanctified it with mitzvah and commanded us. That's the command of Hashem, which is kiyum rotzin ha'elyon, to fulfill the wishes, the want of the Supreme. Kabbalah Soil Mitzvah, to accept the yoke of mitzvah. That's one kavanah. Then the next part of the bracha is the specific kavanah for that mitzvah. Base, the kavanah protis was his verbunden mit Teuchum proti, the specific, detailed, individualized intent, which is tied with Teuchum proti, with the that particular contents, usgula miyuchedes, that special omen, a special brings what it brings with it, was in their mitzvah, that the mitzvah consists of. Hashem commanded us what? Lahoniach tefillin, to put on the tefillin. This is ukamoi. Each represents, like the mitzvahs represent the different limbs and the sinews. The Ramach mitzvah says, mitzvah says, each mitzvah has a specific limb, individualized. It's the general, and then there is the specific, where it touches. We say the 248 positive mitzvah correspond to the 248 limbs. The 365 prohibitions correspond to the 365 sinews. Each mitzvah accomplishes a refinement in that particular limb and part of the person. This is a thing of reason and rationale. The mitzvah accepting is Kabbalah soil, and then to put on the tefillin, which is the particular benefit of that mitzvah, which is already a reason. Der Chiluk zwischen den zwei Kavonas ist verbunden mit den zwei Inyonim und Mitzvahs. The difference of these two kavanas is tied to the two aspects, the two ideas about mitzvahs. Aleph, you have the rotzin ha'elyon baruch hu mitzvahs. That's the will of Hashem in mitzvahs. But in the rotzin is nitoken ischalkus. In the rotzin, the will, there's no difference. All mitzvahs are the same. Umitzadem zayin and alle mitzvahs gleich, and then all mitzvahs are equal. The will of Hashem is not divided up. That's one. But then you have Beis, the second aspect of mitzvahs is Oineg Ha'elyin Baruch Hu, the delight of the Supreme Blessed Be. The pnimius from the Merotzon Elin Shebem mitzvahs, the inner of the Supreme Will that is in mitzvahs, is the delight that he gets from the mitzvahs. Because that Oineg Ha'elyin is anders b'chol mitzvah. The delight of the Supreme is taka different. Every mitzvah brings a different delight. Al derech v'derchilik tzvishon rotzen v'oineg shebenefesh ha'odem. So similar to the difference between the want and the delight which is in the human soul. As in rotzen is nitok in his chalkus. The will, there is no separation. There's no differences. The tekef harotzen is gleich in alle retzenes b'shaveh. The force of the will is equal by everything he wants equally. Mash'egin in Tainug is no ischalkus, as opposed to when we talk about the person enjoying in the soul, the enjoyment of the soul, there's differences. In Yedin koyach is faran and ander min Tainug. In every power, there's a different kind of pleasure. It brings a different level of pleasure. It's not the same pleasure. That's the specifics of every mitzvah. Und the far is faran and ilu in der kavona proti from mitzvahs legabe der kavona clothes. And that's why there is an advantage in that specific intent of the mitzvahs when we measure it relative to the general intent of doing the will of Hashem, the general intent. While in them is faran that oinega elyon baruch hu, because here it consists of, it has in it the delight of the Supreme Blessed Be. Al derech hanal, this is similar to, as we said before, as the nisava kodesh baruch hu, the desire of an Eibishter is dafke tzohom madire b'tachtonim, that it should be in the lower one, was vert oivgiton, durch der hamshoch oich b'pnimius, which is accomplished when you have it come down in a pnimius. So here, the tainug is when the Rotzen Elyon comes down in the specific, that gives the tainug in the limbs, in each one of the limbs where it gets its tainug, because that way, that general, that Taiva Kodesh Baruch comes down in Tachtoinim in each one of the limbs. That's the specific of the mitzvah. So when the mitzvah is done with the intention of that specific mitzvah, that's the level of the nishma, that's the level of the tainug, and that's the level in which there is a difference between each mitzvah, and we accomplish that it should come down in the pnimius in each aver, in each mitzvah individually. So the Rebbe says, now ches, afal pi, as by jeder mitzvah is faran der ilui fun mishpat. So we say by every mitzvah, you have the advantage of mishpat, of the level of coming down in an inner, because every mitzvah has its specific kavona, which is the advantage of mishpat. Mitzad hakavona v'toichem protn shebemitzvah zu, because of the intent and the individualized content of this mitzvah. Kumtes aber nit zu dem ilu was is do in mishpat kipshutoi, but yet it does not come to the advantage of mishpat, literally, when there is judgment, when there is law. Here we said there is oineg in every mitzvah, but then we have the mitzvah of mishpat when it's judgment. So how is that greater? So there's already oineg in every mitzvah. Why is the mitzvah of shoftim v'shoitrim titan l'cho shoftim davke by mishpat? So the Rebbe explains, Varum, that oineg eleki vos is melubesh in mitzvahs, that godly delight which is dressed up in mitzvahs, in every mitzvah, and yet the mitzvah, and in each mitzvah you got a different category of delight, is nor aha ore from the oineg ha'elyon baruch hu. That is only a ray from the supreme delight, blessed be He. It's a ray. It's not the Einig Betzal. Bos is miyuchad b'mehusei v'atzmusei is baruch. That supreme delight, that's united in the essence, and Hashem Himself blessed. Und der Eberster allein is doch poshut betachlis hapshitus. Since Hashem is totally not formatted, simple, in total simplicity, without any definitions, no define. Uns is nechaykas by him kain his chalkus, and there is no applicable. We can't apply there any division in the tainug in atzmus. Nor there is there moker hatainugim. It's the source of the delights. Was von dort wird nimshach haore bemitzvos lechol bechinas kimadrigose. From there extends a ray in mitzvahs to every level according to its level. According to its level, every mitzvah gets a ray from the tainug of the supreme, which is really not dividable because it's meyuchad musavas musar. There is no dividing over there in the etzem tainug. Und das ist der Öftu von Mishpat, and this is what the novelty of Mishpat is Shoftim v'shoitrim titan l'cha. Was damit wird gemeint nicht der Inyan Proti von Mishpat. Here is not meant the particular matter of Mishpat, which every mitzvah has Mishpat in it, the kavanah of that particular mitzvah. Well, that's not what we mean here. Here, when we talk about Shoftim v'shoitrim, we talk the mishpat judge in general, nor inyan hakloli v'shaychus to ganz to the mitzvahs. Here we're talking about the general idea of the general theme of mishpat as it is to the entire Torah mitzvahs, not to any specific mitzvahs. Kinal Sivdalad Baruch, as we said before in Sivdalad. The Far Zokmen der Roif. That's why on that we say Ani Hashem Oyeg Mishpat. Why do we say Hashem loves Mishpat? We're talking about the general judgment in general, not the Kavonas HaMitzvahs, but the general Mishpat, the law, the Sanhedrin, the Torah Shabbat Peh, while in them state Begolui, Nit Nora Ha'ora from the Melech Helyon. Over here, there is not merely a shine from the Supreme Delight, the Yeder Mitzvah Protis, as in every individual mitzvah, nor the Mokara Tainugim, but the source of the Tainugim is there. There Nisave from Atzmus Yisborach, the desire from the blessed Atzmus, that comes down in the level of Mishpat, the Shoftim v'Shoitrim, and that's why Ani Hashem Oyev Mishpat, that's the Tainug in the Atzmus Yisborach. Und das ist auch der Tam, was der Inyan von Mishpat wird gegeben zu Eden. And that's the reason why this idea of Mishpat is given to the Eden mit Sadem was Nar Yisrael v'Yaveu, because they're like a youth. That's why I love them. Davke zu lieb. Zeir Maila from Katnus Ubitl. Because of their advantage, because being small, being humble and subjugated is why they get, in the level of Mishpat, they get the level of the delight of Tainug Atzmus. Weil der Verbund mit Moker hat Tainugim is Because how do you connect with the source of Tanugim? Is nicht durch an Avodah von Tam behergish einig. It's not through a service that you feel, you sense the light. Where you feel the person's entity because he is enjoying it. Only through being small, humble, humility. That's the way to tie yourself to the Pshita Shalmaila, to get the Tainug Elyon, to get the Shoftim V'Shotim, that general level of Mishpat, the Mishpat of the Tainug Matzmusay, is not through Mitzias delight, but is to non-Mitzias, to Nar Yisrael, to the level of Bittul. Tes, Parshas Shoftim, Leint Men Alamol B'Tchilas Chodesh Elul. Portion of Shoftim we always read in the beginning of the month of Elul. Berev Hashonim is Shabbos Parshas Re'ei noch in Chodesh Menachem. Most year the Parshas Re'ei is still in the month of Menachem. It's Shabbos Mevorchim Elul. Unafila when es falt is Rosh Chodesh Elul. Sometimes Parshas Re'ei can also be on Rosh Chodesh Elul. He says the Erste Tog Rosh Chodesh. It's only going to be the first day Rosh Chodesh. Lamed Menachem, which means Re'ei would always be still connected to Menachem. Even in those years when Re'ei is Rosh Chodesh, it's still the first day of Rosh Chodesh, which is the third of Menachem. But Aleph Elul is Alamol b'Parshat Shoftim. The first day of Elul will always be in the portion of Shoftim. So what's the connection between Shoftim and Elul? Let's move on. As the Inyan Anal Benegeit to Shoftim, that this idea, above idea, as it relates to Shoftim, Hota Shayches Miyuchedes to Chodesh Elul. This has a very special connection to the month of Elul. Thus, from the Minhagi Yisrael b'Chodesh Zeh, amongst the customs that is conducted in this month, V'Chayib from Aleph Elul, which begins with the first day of Elul, is Tkiyas Shofar de Elul. That's blowing the Shofar of the month of Elul. So Benegeya dem Inyan von Shofar, gefindt man we find two extremes in part of Shofar. Shofar is Meloshon Shapru Masechem, meaning improve your actions. Shofar Shapru. Was in dem Inyan, was is der Inyan von Tainug. That's the idea of delight. Uliidoch, der Koil Shofar is Matil Ema V'Charoda Heipachoyner. The sound of the shofar puts a fear and a dread, which is the opposite of delight. On one hand, it's improvement, the actions being proper, which is tainug, and then it's fear. That Tzemach Tzedek, the Reif Mevayir, Tzemach Tzedek explains, a shofar is the bechina from moker ha-tanugim. That shofar is the level of the source of tanugim, was is in ganzen hecher, from Gila Tainug, which is entirely higher than the level of revealed, where the Tainug is revealed. And the Faris are Matil Ema V'Charoda. That's why it places a fear and a dread, while the Gilu for Mokar Hatanugim, because the revelation of the source of Tainug is Farbund mit Bitlup Shittus Canal. That is tied to subjugation and simplicity, and therefore it's the non-existence. It's fear, it's the level of bittul. If you do the mashal from Baal Shem Tov, if Kil Shofar, it's known the example of Baal Shem Tov about the sound of the Shofar, Ados Bedugmas, their Kil Poshu, this is similar to the simple voice from B'nai Yechidesh HaLamelech, when the only son of the king was obvious, Yakidu Betvias Ayin the Kolo. The father recognized, he hears the cry of the voice, he recognized the Tvizayin of the voice, he hears the voice, he recognized that's his only son. That's the Kol Shofar. Aber Me'idoch is Shofar Meloshen Tainuk. But on the other hand, Shofar is also comes from the Loshen of Tainuk, delight. Hayois Ados is their Moker, Hatanugun. Because that's the source of the Tainuk from welchen es wird Nimshach Kol Mini Tainuk. From this, eventually all levels of delight extend from. Odosis al derech was the medrash is mevayer benegeya zum mishpat So similar to what the Medrash explains as it relates to Mishpat, Shoftim v'Shoitrim Titan Loch. As in them is Faran derani Havaye Oyev Mishpat. That in this is the love of Hashem, the Tainug of Hashem in Mishpat. Und der Fahr ist es verbunden mit Eden, wie sie sein in dem Öfen von Benar Yisrael v'Haveu. And that's why it's connected to being young, a level of bittul, and the level of nar, and that brings about that love, that tainug, because all the tanugim, the love, come from there. So through this level of bittul, we get the level of all the tanugim. Through the level of mishpat, which is the completeness of din in general, wird aufgetan with the medrash in Messiah, it's accomplished as the medrash concludes as miyad anigoyel oschem geula shleimo. Immediately, I will redeem you a complete redemption. This is Memaimer v'Sichos Shabbos Parshas Shoftim Tovshin Chav Zayin and Divrei Maschil Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah Tovshin Mem Beis, which was also printed as entire Maimer of Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah in Sefer Memorim Melukat Chelav Aleph Omed Tov Chof Aleph and on.